right. Well, happy Easter. Welcome everybody who's tuning in online, who decided to sleep in on this Kansas City rainy day. I haven't had too many Easters in all the last, 30-some years that I've been doing Easter services where, it's just like a rain out kind of thing. So, so usually we get a little sunshine and all that, but there's sunshine in our hearts today. We're glad you're here. I'm starting a new series next week called Adventures in Faith. Adventures in Faith. How many of you like an adventure? Some people don't, right? Some people would rather stay in the comfort of their own home, safe and secure. But some people kind of like to venture out. I remember when The Hobbit came out. I read The Hobbit as a teenager. I was so happy when it became a great film series. And I remember when Gandalf first visited the hobbits in the village. And he was looking for some hobbits who wanted to go on an adventure, right? So Gandalf says, I'm looking for someone to share in an adventure that I'm arranging. And it's very difficult to find anyone. And Bilbo, one of the hobbits, said, well, I should think so. In these parts, we are plain, quiet folks and have no use for adventures. Nasty, disturbing, uncomfortable things make you late for dinner. I can't think what anybody sees in them. Gandalf says, you'll have a tale or two to tell when you come back. Bilbo says, you can promise that I'll come back? Gandalf says, no. And if you do, you'll not be the same. Adventures change us. Think about some of the great stories of adventures in our American history. You think about On the Road with Jack Kerouac. Or think about Cheryl Strayed, who did a memoir called Wild that was turned into a movie in 2012, was released at the Telluride Film Festival, Mountain Film. And it was a story. She was a sexual abuse survivor, and then her mom passed away suddenly in her early years. And she went into a dark, dark space, wrestled with addiction and just a lot of different addictive behaviors as she tried to sort of numb out the pain in her life. And then she decided that she would hike the Pacific Coast Trail over 1,000 miles. If you hike the whole thing, it's over 2,000 miles. She did half of it. And it by herself as a woman, and just hiked and hiked and hiked and wrote and wrote and wrote. And that came out as a memoir called Wild. And it's a beautiful story of how an adventure can change your life. Adventures don't leave us the same. One of my mentors said faith is spelled R-I-S-K. And I think if we follow Jesus, He's going to call us to step out in faith adventures that always have a risk element involved. As we share our lives, as we break open our lives, as we express God's love and grace to everybody around us and receive that ourselves, those kinds of adventures, those risks in faith, change our lives. Jesus' whole life is an adventure. Our whole life really, I think, can be viewed as an adventure. But particularly when we get down to Holy Week, we have people all around the globe right now within the 24 hours of Easter Sunday that are celebrating this event literally around the globe. And it's an amazing week. It's a week that has captured the attention of people around the world. Last week we talked about Palm Sunday, and it was the beginning of Passover week. And so the city of Jerusalem would swell. People would travel, all the Jewish people would travel to Jerusalem to celebrate Passover week. The population could swell by up to 200,000 people as people gathered in Jerusalem from around the world. And because Israel was an occupied country by the Roman Empire, we talked last week how there were actually two processions on Palm Sunday. One of them was the Roman governor Pilate, who was placed there by Tiberius Caesar, and he wanted to make sure that when all these people are in Jerusalem, he wanted to make sure that everybody know who's boss, Who's in control? Who's the dominating power? And so Pilate mounts his army and rides in from the west side of Jerusalem on horses in full armor, flying the eagle of Rome, and basically just with a symbolic statement parade saying, we're in charge, we're the boss, we are the powerful entity here. And then Jesus stages another parade, right? Jesus comes in from the east. He's not on horses, he's not in full armor, he's on a donkey, a borrowed donkey. And the popularity of Jesus is seen because people start waving the palm branches, placing them down, setting the garments down. Jesus is doing like a mock sort of parade, mocking, if you will, the Roman Empire. It's like a performance art protest, if you will. This is Palm Sunday, the triumphal entry. It sets up a conflict that we're going to see play out in this most Holy Week. That was Sunday of Holy Week. Monday, we see that Jesus returns back to the temple, and the court of the Gentiles had been turned into this place where people would be bartering and coming in. Everybody would have to buy sacrifices for the temple, and what had happened was it had become a moneymaker. So poor people from around the world would come, but then they would have to pay exorbitant prices for the animals that they were going to sacrifice in the temple, and it would kind of become a moneymaker thing, right? It's kind of like buying hot dogs at Royals Stadium. You know, a 10-cent hot dog costs you how much now? Has anybody bought a hot dog lately at Royals Stadium? All right. They're cheaper when we're on a losing streak, but they're more money when we get on a winning streak. Anyway, and so this was kind of and then the place where Gentiles could connect in the court all of a sudden is a money-changing place. Jesus expresses a protest against the corruption of a few people who had co-opted with the Roman Empire to make money off of poor people. And Jesus said, this is my Father's house. It's a house of prayer for all nations, for all people everywhere. He turns over the tables, makes another protest. So you see that this is like bringing tension into this whole week of Passover because Jesus is so popular with the Jewish people. They praised as he came in on the donkey, and then now they're observing this temple cleansing on Monday. Now on Tuesday, Jesus begins to teach, and you see that some of the religious leaders who had co-opted their power with Rome were trying to capture Jesus so that they could get rid of him. Why does Rome want to get rid of Jesus right now? Because he's got a popular following, and this threatens the empire, and so the empire of Rome wants to put it down. The Jewish people were vastly loving Jesus and his teachings. They were hoping that he was the Messiah who would overthrow the power of Rome, and so this conflict is set up. The triumphal entry and the mock parade and the turning over of the temples and the protest against the corruption. And then now the teaching on Tuesday, the Mount of Olives. And Jesus predicts the destruction of the temple. He predicts his own death. He teaches how, as a follower of Jesus, there's a pattern in this life. If you wish to come after me, you need to take up your cross and follow me. How many of you like crosses? We like them now. We wear them as ornaments, right? But, wow. It was the most brutal form of torture that had been invented in the first century. It was started by the Assyrians, and they would have a pole, and they would then put people on that pole and kill them and use them in public to make particularly people who were revolting against empire. The cross was used to torture people who were revolting against empire. And yet Jesus takes that image of the cross and flips it and begins to say, hey, there's a pattern here. If you walk the life of love, your life is going to take a cruciform shape, a shape of the cross. We're going to lay our lives down. We're going to risk hurt. We're going to risk looking foolish. We're going to risk giving our lives away, and yet it's in that death that resurrection comes. This pattern of death and resurrection is a deep, deep truth that echoes everywhere in the universe. Deep truths echo everywhere. And Jesus is going to say, this is a pattern that we're to follow. On Wednesday, Jesus is anointed by the woman with oil, and it's almost like a burial anointing, if you will. And yet, it's a time where Jesus says, hey, this is the time where things are going to come to a focus here. And so on Thursday night, as he gathers with his disciples, he meets for a meal. It's a Passover meal. The stage is set. Judas has already betrayed Jesus, and yet Jesus seats Judas at the place of honor, as though he's saying, hey, Judas, I know what you've done. I love you. I forgive you. And he sets him at the place of honor. Judas is going to slip out that Thursday night and let the Roman authorities know where Jesus is located. And so they share that meal, that Passover meal. Jesus takes the bread and the cup and begins to transform that into the image of a cruciform life, a body broken open, blood shed. The symbolism, image of that is a life laid down, broken open in love, to give ourselves in a risk-taking adventure to spread the love and grace of God wherever we might go. It's interesting, at that meal on Thursday night, Jesus took the role of a servant. Nobody was there at the house to cleanse the dirty feet of the people. And so Jesus takes off his robe and is in the garments of a servant, and he picks up the bowl and the towel, and he bends down to wash the feet of all of the disciples, showing and demonstrating the way of love, the way of servanthood, the way of a life laid down, broken open, that all people might come into this life of grace and love and beauty. That happened that Thursday night as Jesus took the bread and broke it and took the wine and shared it. And then he goes to pray in the middle of the night in the Garden of Gethsemane. So he leaves Jerusalem, goes down into the valley, the Kidron Valley, and then up the little hill right there in the Mount of Olives. There's olive trees right there today that they say the roots of those olive trees are ancient, perhaps going back thousands of years, okay? And you can get in that little olive grove there. This is where Jesus went to pray through the night. And he was saying, Father, not my will, but yours be done. They didn't take Jesus in the daytime. They took him at night. Why? He was too popular with the Jewish people. They could have never gotten away with it in the daytime. So Judas slips away, tells where Jesus is going to be, and then the Roman authorities come in the middle of the night while Jesus is praying with his disciples, and they arrest him. Remember, Peter and the Messiah and the disciples, they're still confused about what's going to really go down. They're still thinking Jesus is going to be a military Messiah that will overthrow Rome with military power. He's so popular among the Jewish people. At some point, they're thinking he's going to rally the people, and they've seen all the supernatural miracles. And he's going to use his supernatural power to overthrow the armies of Rome. So when he comes to be arrested in that night, Peter, the bold one, pulls out his sword. Peter's packing. He still thinks that we're going to take this thing by force. So Peter pulls his sword, and he swipes at the high priest's servant's ear, Malchus's ear. And it says he cut. I always imagine an ear being cut off, because then it says, Jesus says, hey, put your sword away. This isn't the way out. This isn't the way. It's not with force. It's not with violence. It's not with military might. Jesus heals the guy's ear, and then they arrest him. And in the middle of the night, he goes to Annas, he goes to Caiaphas, he goes to Herod, back to Caiaphas, Annas. He's bouncing around between authorities. They're trying to pin something on him to put him away. Why? Because he's so popular. The Roman authorities want to squelch this popular uprising and end it. And the way they do that is take the leader and crucify him publicly to put an end to this public following that Jesus had. One of the big misconceptions is that the same crowd that sang Hosanna on Palm Sunday is the same crowd that yelled, "Crucify him," on Friday morning. That's totally inaccurate. They took him in the middle of the night because he was so popular with the people on Sunday, popular all week long. It was a few people who were in collusion with the Roman government that took Jesus in the middle of the night, tried him in the middle of the night, which is against the law. And then by early Friday morning, they're scourging Jesus. Then the whips and the lashes on the back, the cat of nine tails. It's a horrible, horrible, excruciating event. Most men would die from the scourging alone, but then to carry your cross and then to be placed on that cross and crucified in the most brutal way that first century culture could figure it out. Most people, if they hadn't been scourged, would have lived days, and they would feed people when they were up on the cross. And they would hang there, and they'd push up to breathe, and then their muscles would contract, and then they would have to slouch back down, but then in that position they couldn't breathe again. So they would be just bobbing up and down on the cross for days. People would be feeding them, putting sponges and food and different things like that. It'd be a long, drawn-out torture. But because of the scourging, and because for time and eternity Jesus was there hanging on the cross, taking on all of the hatred, all of the sin, all of the power of the oppressors, and transforming that into love. As Jesus hangs there, he says, "Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing." To the thief or crook on the right, he's like, "Today I'll see you in paradise." He thinks of his mother while he's hanging on the cross. Be with her. He's saying, "I'm thirsty." He's saying, "It is finished." Every word from the cross is a word drawn from love and grace and mercy, shed through a life broken open. And then he's placed in the grave. Saturday is a dark, dark day. Jesus in the grave. Death looks like it's won. Satan looks like he's won the victory. Death looks like it has closed the door on all hopes in the people's hearts in Israel. Death has won the day. Darkness covers the earth. It's a dark, dark day. It's interesting. Jesus had predicted his death, but if people would have believed it, if people would have actually tied into it, don't you think that people would have all been standing out outside the grave on Sunday mornings like, "Hey, he told us he was going to come back"? You know, you could have gotten the first century news channels there, right? CBS, NBC, ABC, all the different news channels, all the different, everybody would have been gathered around, ready to see this event. And yet, there were only a few women that went to the grave on that Sunday morning to prepare and to remember and to anoint that grave and to honor the life of Jesus. And when they arrived that early Sunday morning, the stone had been rolled away. There were linens in there that were wrapped in the body, but they were empty. Confused, an angel appeared. And of course, when angels appear, they freak everybody out and scare everybody. And then after an angel visited, then Jesus showed up, but he wasn't quite recognizable. The women mistook Jesus for the gardener, which is an interesting one because when we go back to the Genesis story, the first humans are pictured as being in the garden. And Jesus is mistook as the gardener. But then he speaks, and then they realize, it's Jesus. The women tell the disciples that disciples are coward and fear. Peter has already denied Jesus 3 times. They can't believe it. What's going on? So they run to the grave. John and Peter run. And in John's gospel only, John says, that he beat Peter to the grave. It says John ran on ahead. John's writing the gospel, and he wants the whole world to know that he's faster than Peter. I'm a runner and a distance athlete. I know how important that is, right? So he runs to the grave. It's empty. They don't know what to think about this. On that Sunday afternoon, word is spreading. The tomb is empty. The stone's been rolled. And there's a guy named Cleopas who's on a hike, on an adventure on the road to Emmaus. It's about 7 miles west of Jerusalem. They're walking along and they're talking about everything that's happened, and then all of a sudden somebody joins them. This is Luke 24. It's one of the appearances of Jesus. And he's walking along with him, and he's like, Jesus, like, what are you guys talking about? And Jesus asks the question, what are you guys talking about? And they're like going, oh, haven't you heard? You know, they're talking about Jesus, and Jesus is like disguised. They don't even recognize him. And they say, you must be the only person in all of Jerusalem who hasn't heard this story yet. And so they start telling Jesus about Jesus. And then Jesus says, well, haven't you read the scriptures? Haven't you read Moses and the prophets? And then Jesus unpacks Moses and the prophets and the messianic passages that are the nonviolent ones that talk about bringing peace through love and grace and laid down life and sacrifice, that the suffering servant of Isaiah 58 was the true identity of the Messiah, not a military king who would overthrow with violence, but a prince of peace who would lay his life down in love and sacrifice, that all might join in to this resurrection of grace and hope and love. Jesus walks a dark path that leads to death, that ultimately leads to resurrection, hope, and life. It's interesting, as they walk to Emmaus, about 7 miles, you could walk it fast in 2 hours, slowly in 5 hours. Jesus is unpacking the scriptures, and then they get to the place where they were going in Emmaus, and they decide to share a meal, and Jesus then uses the words of institution once again. Jesus took the bread. Jesus blessed it. Jesus broke it. And then he gave it. And as soon as he gave it, their eyes open. They see Jesus. And then he vanishes. Whew. Could you believe it? Remember when Jesus fed the 5,000 and they only had a few loaves and a few fishes, and there was too many people, and the disciples are saying, send them away. But Jesus says, no, this is an adventure. This is an opportunity to put faith into action. Faith is spelled R-I-S-K. And so Jesus takes the loaves and the fishes, and with the bread, he does the same thing. He takes, he blesses, he breaks it, and then as he breaks it, he hands it to all of the disciples, and then they say, you feed them. And there's not enough to feed them, but as they step out in faith and they give what little they have in faith, the miracle begins to take place of multiplication of love, of hunger, of food for the hungry, of feeding those that are thirsty, that are longing for hope and grace and love. And this model of taking and blessing and then breaking and then giving is the act of a laid down life. It's a life broken open. When Jesus met with the disciples that Thursday night of Holy Week and shared the Lord's table, he takes the bread, blesses it, breaks it, and gives it. And now, here again on the road to Emmaus, in this resurrection appearance, it's only when Jesus takes the bread, blesses it, breaks it, and gives it that Jesus is seen. It's when our lives follow that pattern of a cruciform life, a life laid down, a life not to dominate and control, but a life to give and to serve and to love. It's this life that proves to be the life of love and grace that this world so desperately needs. In the children's story by Margie Williams, written in 1922, The Velveteen Rabbit, she talks about the importance of love and what it means to be real and what it means to have a life that is broken open. But it's told between two children's animals in the playroom that come alive and talk to each other, kind of like Toy Story. And the Skin Horse says, real isn't how you're made, it's a thing that happens to you. When a child loves you for a long, long time, not just to play with, but really loves you, then you become real. Does it hurt? Asked the rabbit. Sometimes, said the Skin Horse, for he was always truthful. When you're real, you don't mind being hurt. Does it happen all at once, like being wound up, he asked, or bit by bit? It doesn't happen all at once, said the Skin Horse. You become. It takes a long time. That's why it doesn't often happen to people who break easily or have sharp edges or have to be carefully kept. Generally, by the time you are real, most of your hair has been loved off, your eyes have dropped out, and you get loose in the joints and very shabby. But these things don't matter at all because once you're real, you can't be ugly, except to people who don't understand. It's this vulnerability and this authenticity, and it's this life of love that Jesus shows us and demonstrates for us again and again in his teachings, in his parables, in his life and actions. It was over and over and over again the life of love, a life poured out, a life given in self-sacrifice that all people might join in this community of love and grace. When Jesus vanishes from this road to Emmaus journey, this adventure, the comment that the disciples made, didn't our hearts burn within us? Didn't our hearts burn within us? There's an old 80s hair band, Survivor. If you were a Rocky fan, you know this song, right? And here I want to just read. They said to each other, didn't our hearts burn within us as he talked to us on the road and explained to us the scriptures? You know, those who saw Jesus didn't have all the answers. If you go on, these two guys, Cleopas and his friend, hiked all the way back to Jerusalem to tell the disciples. And they got there. And as they told the story, the disciples were telling their stories, and they were all filled with what? Perfect belief? No, listen to this. It says they were all still startled and frightened, and they were filled with doubt. They were filled with disbelief, but then they were filled with wonder and joy all at the same time. It's like, how do we understand all of this stuff? It's so overwhelming. They weren't quite sure how to place it all, but they knew that they had encountered love and grace and mercy. And their hearts that were so beat down all of a sudden began to resurrect in hope and love, in beauty and grace. In the Survivor song, it says, in the burning heart, just about to burst, there's a quest for answers, an unquenchable thirst. In the darkest night, rising like a spire, in the burning heart, the unmistakable fire. This is death. This is resurrection. This is what beats in our human hearts as we pursue this journey of faith in this world. A life broken open. Let's worship Jesus together. God, thank you for this time, and thank you for this Resurrection Sunday. We ask for your grace and love and mercy to overwhelm and fill us in this resurrection day. Give us hope where there's darkness. Give us peace where there's worry and anxiety. Fill our hearts with a love that lays itself down to serve others and to walk this path of broken open love and grace and mercy. May we be a community that walks this out. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.